Have you ever been asked to play a tabletop role playing game for the first time and didn't have the slightest idea how to prepare for the experience? Today, I have with me Jonathan Eisemann, who's uniquely qualified to talk about new player preparation. He's got over 20 years' experience playing and running tabletop RPGs. At his table, he runs games such as Pathfinder 2E by Paizo, Star Wars RPG by Fantasy Flight Games, and Avatar Legends by Magpie Games for both new and seasoned players. Lastly, he is a champion of fostering teamwork and creativity at the table, finding the balance between upholding the rules of the game without losing the fun of the game. Welcome to Claim to Game, the podcast helping busy people master tabletop role playing games one game at a time. I'm Clint.scheirer. I've been an educator for over 12 years and have helped gamers of all levels quickly grasp tabletop RPGs so they can enjoy playing them to the fullest. Stay tuned so that you can make your claim to game. Jonathan Eisemann, hello and welcome to Claim to Game.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, it was an absolute no-brainer for me to ask you to join this episode. The first time that we met, I knew that we were kindred spirits. It was on a Microsoft Teams video call, and your virtual background had the Rebel Command Center from either Hoth or Yavin.
Yep.
I can't remember which one.
Yavin Command Base.
Yeah, the Star Wars trilogy, near and dear to my heart. And from then on, our conversations revealed that you have a long-time passion for this hobby of tabletop role-playing games, and also a care and a thoughtfulness to the games that you run and also the games that you play. And so I want to start off by having you take me back to when I originally reached out to you to play Goblin Quest the RPG for Season 1, our actual play of Claim to Game. What did you feel like when Clint, reached out to you and said, hey, I want you to play this brand new tabletop RPG?
Well, first off, I was super excited. We'd shared our passion for Pathfinder. You'd introduced me to, not introduced me directly to your group, but I'd gotten to see the recording of your group playing. So I knew that you guys had a really fun atmosphere. So I was like, I gotta play a game with this guy at some point. And then you reached out to me and were like, hey, do you want to play this game? And I was like, sure, what is it? And then you explained it to me, and I was like, this is exactly my alley. I get to be a little chaos goblin. I'm in. It was a no-brainer.
So what do you like about goblins? Like, you've mentioned multiple times, have you gotten to play goblins in other RPGs?
Oh, all the time. I love using goblins as NPCs. I think that there's a lot of variety in how goblins are portrayed. So they make good enemies, they make good allies. I've played some goblins in Pathfinder. I've played some goblins in some older D&D, which was a little bit like, hey, don't tell anybody, you're playing a monster. No, I love goblins. I've got, I showed you guys last time, I've got dice with goblin heads in the core. I have somewhere around here a dice bag that's a goblin head. I think they're great.
Okay, so you were excited.
I was.
When I reached out and said there's a brand new tabletop RPG to play, you were excited. Is that how you've always been since you started playing tabletop RPGs? Like, somebody introduces a new game to you and you're just like, let's do this. I want to know everything about it.
So this might sound bad. Not always. A lot of the times I am. I was excited the first time I got to play Star Wars tabletop, or first time I played Pathfinder, D&D. There are a lot of games that, right away, I'm like, I'm in. That sounds great. And then there's some times where somebody tells me about a game, and I'm like, I don't know, man. This doesn't really sound like my dig. And then we play it, and of course I have a great time, because it's really about the people that you're with. Some games are a little bit crunchier, and sometimes I enjoy that, and some games are a little bit looser, and sometimes I enjoy that. But it really is the people at your table that make the game, in my opinion.
Can you give me some examples of games that you felt a little bit more hesitant to jump
Absolutely.
into?
So, I don't know if you've heard of this, and this is not a bad word about this game. I have heard amazing things about a game called Lancer, which is a mech-based tabletop role-playing game. I cannot, for the life of me, wrap my head around the rules, so I'm going to have to just play it with somebody that knows how to play it someday, and then I'll get it, right? Like sometimes just sitting down with the book just doesn't get me there. I don't have that like light bulb going off moment, and also I'm a little bit hesitant. So I have kind of a Gundam background. Just finished up season 1 of Gundam 00 literally yesterday. So I've got a little bit of a Gundam's background. So when I looked at Lancer, I was a little confused because they're kind of a bridge between Gundam style mech and Battletech mech. If I'm understanding the system correctly, there's always an underlying like military, global economy, global politics aspect to giant robot media, and it doesn't really get me. That said, I've heard a lot of people that I know that like Gundams that were very interested in Lancer, but I just wasn't as excited when I first heard about it.
What about the rules? Like, just doesn't like that doesn't click when you're reading the rules and you're like, I don't get it. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here. What makes it feel that way?
I'm glad you said that. So when you asked me to play Goblin Quest, and I asked if I could read the rulebook, and you sent me the rulebook, and I sat down and I read the rulebook like I was reading a book. Like I literally went page to page and went through it. When I look at Lancer, like anytime I own a copy of the core rulebook over on my shelf over there, and if I sit down with that book, I feel like I'm reading a textbook. There's just something that doesn't um, like grip me and pull me in, if that makes sense.
Grant does a really good job of using humor.
He does.
Yeah, and just a sarcasm and kind of a quirky. I don't know. His jokes are right up my alley, and so when I read something and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's hilarious. It feels like I'm reading an episode of Family Guy, but instead maybe the D&D version. What was the first thing that you did after you knew that we were going to be playing this game?
Absolutely. So the first thing I did is I made sure I had a set of dice picked out that I was going to be using for my goblin or goblins. And then the second thing I did, which is I think the first thing you got to see me do, was ask for a copy of the rule book and then consume that like a meal. I really picked the bones clean on that one.
Yeah, so asking for the rules. Now, sometimes I buy a copy of the rule book of whatever game it is because I'm so like excited. Maybe I like the setting. Do you usually go and purchase the actual game before trying to get some taste of it, or do you try to like scour the internet first before making like an actual purchase?
My preferred way of approaching new games is generally to either buy a pared down version of the rules or to actually sit down and play a game first with somebody who knows how to play it, and then if I like it, then I'm like cool, and then I go buy a bunch of stuff for it.
Do you feel like it's necessary as a player to have all of the materials before jumping in to purchasing the book and also the materials for the game?
That's an interesting question. I really want to say no, but my bookshelf disagrees with me.
So for you, it's not.
Right.
But,
For
or
me,
it
it's not
is.
an option. For other people, I'd say definitely like give it a try. Right. Like don't jump feet first in. Right. Like look before you leap. It's great advice. Myself, I leap. I'm a leaper. I've always been a leaper. So I dive in and then I learn how to doggy paddle when I'm in the water.
And you know, something I've noticed that some tabletop RPG companies or publishers will do is they will give a free basic set of the rules
Yep.
that you can download the PDF. They may even do a quick one-shot adventure that is free, so you don't have to drop a bunch of cash. Usually it's a PDF version
Yep.
that you can download. I found that's been really helpful for me. But usually I go out at that from a DM side of things. If I'm the game master, I'm the one looking up the adventure. And then as a player, have you found that any companies do some really cool things for players when they're trying to get into a game, whatever that may be, like freebies?
I'm gonna sound like a shill, but Paizo puts together beginner boxes. So there's a Starfinder beginner box, there's a Pathfinder beginner box, and in those beginner boxes, there's pre-made characters. It comes with a set of dice. There's like a lot of resources to help new people, and there's a pre-written adventure. that you like if the DM wants to run the adventure, they can run it for players, but there's also a pre-written solo adventure so the DM can do like a choose your own adventure and kind of get a feel for it. I think that that's really cool. The other thing is I like games that have a welcoming community. Going along the same lines, I went to a convention recently with a friend of mine, and they had a whole floor of a hotel reserved, and they were Wizards of the Coast D&D Adventures League. They were running Pathfinder. They were running Starfinder. There was somebody running a table of like Call of Cthulhu. And anytime you can sit down and just play the game and be like, listen, I don't know what's happening here. Put a piece of paper in my hands. Tell me what numbers I need to look at, and you tell me which dice I need to roll, and like I'll figure the rest of it out as we go.
So community.
Oh,
Would you say
absolutely.
community is really important? And you've mentioned a few. Can you restate or just talk about some other ways that people can get into the gaming community, the tabletop role-playing community, to have these experiences?
Oh, definitely. So, most of the gaming that I'm aware of, you'll find people on community discords. So there's like a Pathfinder Discord. I'm sure there's a D&D Discord. There's like subreddits, right? There's a looking for group subreddit. There's a subreddit for basically every tabletop game I've ever seen in existence. Because one thing is, when you like something, you like talking about it. So people will create their spaces to talk about these things that they love. Yeah, there's online resources. I've recently actually become aware of, and this is not a new thing in any means. I'm just really late to the game on this one, but Meetup. Meetup can help you find people that are actually playing physically in your area. So I found my local Pathfinder Society group, and I've been going weekly to game with them.
And that's another thing to consider. I've always run one shots
Sure.
because I feel like one shots, the investment is very low. Like
Mm-hmm.
the commitment is very low. And I love when new players want to try the hobby for the first time. And if they're like, a one shot is a great way to give them an exit ramp if it's not
Absolutely.
their jam. They're
Right.
just like, it was
You're like,
kind of
listen,
weird. And
can I just borrow 90 minutes of your time? And if you hate it, then that's only 90 minutes wasted. But if you love it, then that 90 minutes is going to turn into 3 hours, and we'll see you again next week.
what is your process usually when you're starting to get a game? You mentioned a few things. Like first, you're a leaper, so
Yep.
you like to get all the stuff. But once you have all the stuff, you mentioned consuming the literature. What does that look like for you? What does the consumption of that book or of that material look like?
Sure. So I've recently started tempering myself by trying to dive in with beginner boxes. Anything like starter sets, beginner boxes, stuff that's intended to be kind of a foot in the door. The most recent example of that is I bought the Avatar Legends starter set from Magpie Games. I have played a couple of narrative-based games in the past. This one was written very differently. So the first thing I did was I opened up there's I believe 3 books. There's one that explains like the rules in a quick like 30 I say quick 30 pages, but like it's a relatively small book given the size of some of those rule books out there. And then there is an adventure book, and then there is like I think a character book. They tend to give you where they want you to start. Like read this one first because this will give you the framework, the foundation that everything's built on. And then once you understand that, you can understand how they've built what they've built, right? As examples. So that's how I'm enjoying starting now. Previously, I would just buy the player's handbook and the GM's handbook if it was a separate book, and I would try to read them like textbooks.
My first game, and I've shared this with other people on the pod, D&D,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that is the most well-known tabletop role-playing game in the world at this point. In the early 2020s,
Oh,
it's
definitely.
the game, right? And there's the movie.
Yep.
There's all the stuff going on there. It's really expanded beyond nerd culture. There's so many articles and so many things that talks about that, how it started out as taboo and now it's like becoming a part of mainstream, like the cool thing to do.
Sure.
The very first pages, I don't know what pages, I remember reading the 5E, here's how you make your character, and here's how you roll your stats, and here's how you get into the game. And now that you have like the basis, let's do it for you.
Right.
Pathfinder does a very similar thing in Paizo's book, walking you through step by step what needs to happen. It sounds like Magpie Games does the same thing, so it's a formula,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
definitely. Well, yeah, you start people with what is this, right? And I think all of them do that. You start with what is a tabletop game? And then once you understand what a tabletop game is, well, then what is this tabletop game? Because this tabletop game, Avatar, is very different from this tabletop game. Pathfinder, very different from this tabletop game, Call of Cthulhu, right? So there's a baseline that you set that each of them does in their own way of setting expectations of what is a game and then what is our game.
Yeah, I like that. What is our game? What is the game happening right now?
Exactly.
Uh, there's always tabletop role playing. There's dice.
Hmm.
I don't think I've ever. There are dice-less ones
I haven't
out
played
there.
any, but I would. If somebody wants to invite me to a diceless game, let me know.
Yeah, hey, maybe we'll do one here. I mean, there's some very creative narrative games that I have played, and I tend to be more of a storyteller.
Sure.
One of my heroes is Robin D. Laws, and I've mentioned him a few times in our podcast, and he really breaks down. It's not his own hierarchy, but he really breaks down the different types of gaming styles that players would have.
Sure.
And I am very much a method actor. I'm very much a storyteller. I want to be my character and do what my character would do. Narrative-based stories, I think, really lend to that. You mentioned Fantasy Flight's Star Wars RPG. I love that.
Oh, definitely.
There's a bit of crunchiness in there that I don't get. Like there's some rules in there that like with mechanics of the ships and mechanics of
Yep.
all the stuff that I'm like, oh gosh, I don't really understand. So maybe I need to run a game that you play sometime to figure out those rules. What I'd like you to do is if you were forced to take your process for learning a game and make it into three easy steps that somebody could remember, that somebody could take with them. They're like, okay, this Jonathan guy, he's been playing games for over 20 years. Like, how can I do that being fresh, brand new, but I want to get into this hobby because it sounds cool. Like I used to watch Avatar growing up on TV, or I watched all the Star Wars. I didn't know they made games where you could pretend to be in Star Wars or any of those things. What would your three steps be?
Okay, so this one's hard for me because I'm I get really excited really fast, right? And I jump. So if I had to give advice on what I would think is the best way to do this, not necessarily the way I do it, but what I would recommend is step one, figure out what you want to play. There's a lot of different games. Some people like the math. Like if you're a big like MMO person, right? You like figuring out a build and you want to go after like an optimum way to play a game. There are games for that. If you're somebody who just wants to tell a story, like if you're really into theater, there are narrative driven stories that almost never touch dice. So the first step is definitely figure out what you want to play. And then the second step is find a group, and that can be hard. Sometimes it's a struggle to find a group that's playing what you want, how you want, when you want, right? Because scheduling is the real villain of any tabletop game. But then, so once you know what you want to play, and then where you're going to play it or when you're going to play it, then figure out like how to play it. Even if it's just, I know that I need a D20, I need a pen and paper, and somebody will teach me as I go. Like that's completely valid. If you're somebody who like really wants to get into the know-how of the rules, I would recommend one of the first books that I ever picked up personally was How to DM for Dummies. Learn about it, right? It's the tabletop equivalent of reading the instruction booklet that came with your new video game back in the day. Not everybody did it, but those who did knew things that people that didn't read it knew.
There was a game called Breath of Fire for Super Nintendo, and then
Okay.
Breath of Fire 2. And if you didn't use the instruction booklet, you couldn't beat the game.
Sure.
Like, it was telling you bits of the story that the game itself wasn't telling you, that you wouldn't have the context without using the instructions, which I
Well,
just
that's
think is
like,
so.
did you know the ghosts in Pac-Man have names?
Oh, yeah, Blinky and Winky and.
Something like that. I don't know their names off the top of my head, but I know that that was in the instruction booklet, and if you didn't read it, you didn't know.
Yeah, there's so many things like that with the instruction booklets.
Yeah.
Ready Player One is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. If you've
Sure.
never heard the Audible version, Will Wheaton reads it. It is unbelievable.
Nice.
Former Star Trek actor Wesley Crusher. But Will Wheaton's phenomenal. And a big proponent of tabletop role-playing games, of course.
Nice.
Okay, so just to recap,
Mhm.
your 3 steps are figure out what you want to play. And that could be based on your interests, what you like, what you think is unique, what you love about gaming. It might be the
Right.
numbers, it might be the math. Step 2 is find a group, which we
Mhm.
mentioned you can do through Discord channels for a particular game, looking for a game. We even have a Discord channel for Claim to Game where there is a section where you can find a group. It's a little small at this point, but eventually maybe
It'll
one
get
day
there.
it'll be a thriving community. And then 3, figure out how to play it.
Yeah.
And there's many different ways to do that. You can read player's manuals. You can do beginner's boxes. There's so many YouTube channels out there. There's this podcast that tries to walk you through specific games. That's the aim here, is to help you master those different games one game at a time.
Yeah. Can you recommend any podcast that might teach people how to play games? I feel like that would be really helpful.
Yeah. I think that Sly and Flourish
Oh,
is
okay.
amazing. So Lazy Dungeon Master, Mike Shea, we've talked about him a little bit. He is more for game masters and helping them learn how to prep quicker, faster, and easier.
Gotcha.
He's been doing it for years. Like, I think since I don't want to quote this, but I think I've seen his YouTube channel go back to like 2013, which, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is now. That's over
Right.
10 years
That's 10
of
years.
YouTube at least. So I guess 11-ish. But yeah, Mike Shea is really phenomenal. How it's played, I think, for Pathfinder 2e is I can't
Phenomenal
remember the
tool.
author. Yeah, just goes through rules bits by bits, which I think is great. The people who get really into it, I think, are people, if you really want to know a game inside and out. You know, a lot of times people will say, well, I don't have the time, right? Like, I want to learn this. I want to go hang out with my friends who are all about this. I just want to know enough that I can jump in. And there's videos out there for that too.
The advice I'd give to that actually is almost universally. Now, I'm sure that there's an exception to every rule, right? But I have not yet met the person that gets disappointed when one of their friends says, "You play a lot of tabletop. Can I come and play sometime?" You got to have people to play. If you're our friend, of course we want you to play. Like, we'll find a way.
Who were we talking about? Joe O'Brien
Mhm.
from the Glass Cannon Network. He has a theory that, and I think it's also Troy LaValle has a theory that sports people who love sports, who love the numbers and statistics, they would love tabletop role-playing
Sure.
games. They would love tabletop role-playing games. They just need to try it.
Find the one that you like.
Find the one that you like, and then, it's really like having your own player in a
Yeah.
sports team for a collaborative goal that you're all striving for. So, pretty cool.
Yeah, the same things apply, right? Like they say, get your kids to play sports in school because they'll learn teamwork and they'll learn integrity and they'll learn critical thinking. They'll learn hand-eye coordination. And anybody that I know learns those same skills in tabletop, and we can throw our dice in the tray.
That's right. Create a 10-word phrase to share with listeners that embodies your process above. So just to recap, your process was, what do you want to play? Find a group, figure out how to play it. I don't think that's 10 words, is it?
I don't think it's quite 10 words. Boy, 10 words exactly. No more, no less, huh?
So 10 words. This was a strategy that was taught to me from a book called Make Noise. And it was about podcasting, and it's talking about if something is directive and very focused, it helps you understand when you make decisions what you should do. If you have a 10-word thing to live by when you're doing tabletop RPGs, it helps you make decisions. Should I get the whole set here, or should I be jumping into a community?
I think I've got it, and I'm
All right.
I'm going to say it, and I'm also going to send it to you in the chat, so that
Nice.
you've got a copy of it.
All right.
And I think that this is probably the single most important piece of advice that I can give. This is going to sum up my entire theory about gaming.
I can't wait.
Yeah. So my 10-word phrase of advice that embodies the core of my process is if you're interested, just ask. People want you to know.
If you're interested, just ask. People want you to know.
Yeah,
The people being the people in this tabletop community.
sure. People in any tabletop community. Tabletop communities do not thrive by being exclusionary. The more people playing the game, the better. In every game, in every instance. Now, a specific table might have a limit. They might have too many people to have more people, but then you just make more tables. That's the beauty of it. Is there's an infinite number of tables potentially, and people want to share this. If they're enjoying it, they want to talk about it. So, if you're even mildly interested, if you ask, they will talk and talk and talk and talk about it.
It's true. One of my favorite things to ask at like a party or if I'm going somewhere, Jonathan, is I don't ask anymore, what do you do for a living? Right? Like that's so easy and people will tell you and then like it might be interesting or they may like not like what they do.
Right.
Instead, I've started asking people, what do you love to do? And they will talk for hours and there is no end to what they have to say. And if it's a tabletop role-playing gamer, you will be talking about tabletop RPGs the
Oh
entire
yeah.
time.
Or even what do you wish you could be doing this weekend? Right?
Oh, I like that one.
There's a convention that I'm unfortunately not going to make it to. So that would be my answer, right? Is if I could, I would be at that convention playing a tabletop game. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend that convention, so I'm going to a different tabletop thing.
Well, good for you. Way to make it happen. Way to find your tribe.
Yep.
Where your community's at. If people want to connect with you,
Mhm.
or if they wanted to find you somewhere where it was an appropriate place, like they're not just like, hey, here you are, Jonathan, at McDonald's.
Right.
Good to see you. How can they connect? Where can listeners find you online if they wish to connect?
I'm not in a ton of places online. I tend to like kind of keep to myself, doing my own thing. But I'm in your Discord. They can find me. I'm Scythewolf. A lot of people say Sithwolf. It's Scythewolf. CYTHWULF. I'm not really on social media that much, but I'm on Discord. I'm around. I'm like in game forums. I'm on Reddit. If you start digging around in areas, if it's one of my hobbies, I'm sure you'll find me there.
Very good. And I will say that Reddit is such a I think their tagline is like dive into anything
Yeah,
or something or used to be.
something like
Um,
that.
the tabletop playing community in Reddit is robust
Wildly
and
active. Wildly
people
active. You can't.
absolutely.
It's way too much to keep up with.
I mean, I
Good problem to
I've
have.
well, and that's how I found Goblin Quest because I was busy and
Hmm.
I wanted to run games, but I couldn't teach everybody how to play D&D every time I wanted a new player,
Sure.
and I also wanted something quick, one and done. And there's a Reddit for one-page RPGs, and Grant Howitt writes one-page RPGs. It just so happened that Goblin Quest is like 70 plus pages,
Right.
so he
Still
took a
pretty.
stab at a few more.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Jonathan, thanks for being here. I hope to have you again as another interviewee. And did you have any last words that you want to leave anybody with?
I'll be in your Discord if anybody has any questions specifically for me. I'm not sure why they would. I'm just a guy. But
We're all just
uh,
guys
yeah, yeah, no,
or girls
yeah,
or
yeah,
people.
definitely. No, just I guess go have fun. If you want to play a game, like ask, people will try and get you into a game. And if you don't like how that game went, like try a different game. There's lots of games. There's lots of ways people play. The way that I run a table of Pathfinder, wildly different from the way that any of my friends run a Pathfinder table. Because, what's the thing? If you put 10 people in a room and ask a question, you get 10 opinions. Like, everybody has their own style of doing things. So, really, at the end of the day, like, you'll find a group that plays what you want to play, how you want to play it. And if you don't, you can be the one, be the change you want to see. Start your own table and then you'll find people who were looking for your table.
Was that Gandhi that said "Be the change you"? No, Nelson Mandela.
I think so. I'm not
Yeah,
quite sure who said it, but yeah, very
you're the
applicable quote.
you're the Nelly Mandela of tabletop role playing games, Jonathan.
Uh-oh. I don't know about that. I'm glad I get to be your community, and I'm really excited for some more episodes on the way.
Your famous last words. I'll see you on the Discord.
That's right. See you on the Discord, everybody.
Join us next time as we continue our quest, Claiming Goblin Quest. When you just aren't feeling the goblins or the Great Battle Camp, how can you use the mechanics of this game for other settings and stories? The official term for this is rules hacks, and let me tell you, there are plenty of them available to pick in the Goblin Quest RPG book. We'll go through each hack in its very own episode. The Claim to Game podcast has one mission, helping busy people master tabletop role-playing games one game at a time. If you are enjoying what you are hearing, please share the Claim to Game podcast with others. Share it with at least one other person you know who listens to podcasts and who could benefit from what this show has to offer. Especially after listening to this episode, if they're a new player getting ready to play for the very first time, this is their ep. This helps grow the show, spreads the message, and helps others learn new tabletop role-playing games. Remember to share the show. Many apps where you listen to podcasts have a share button. Get that share button, hit it, text it over to your good old buddy or pal. And until the next time we make our claim to game, one game at a time.